Okay, 7 o'clock, so we will reconvene to our regular session. Evelyn, if you could start with a roll call.
Trustee Lee.
Here.
Trustee King is absent. Trustee Marquez.
Here.
Vice President Wakely.
Present.
President Welts.
Here. Let's see. So, report out on closed session. For 3.1, we received information and the board decided not to pursue the attorney's recommendation. And for 3.2 and 3.3, we received information and no action was taken. Great. Welcome, everyone. Good evening. It's the February 26th, 2025 meeting of the Redwood City School District Governing Board. Buenas noches a la reunión de la Redwood City District Board of Trustees. Si requiere interpretación al español, por favor llama al 978-990-5137 y presione 837-7041 y el signo de número. Si asiste a la reunión en persona, solicite un transmisor situado a la fonda de la sala. Okay, again, welcome. All members of the public are partners in education, and the board encourages you to participate and provide comments on issues of concern, regardless of whether they are on the agenda. So to speak, please complete a speaker's card online, or if you're here in person, you'll find speaker's cards available at the entrance to complete and then hand to Evelyn. If you're addressing a subject that's listed on the agenda, you'll be called at the time the item is being considered. If the issue is not on the agenda, you'll be called shortly during the oral communication agenda item. And then, to be fair to all speakers, we limit public comments to 3 minutes per person per topic, unless otherwise noticed. And we have, okay, so this is for agenda item 13.4. I have one speaker's card here. Let me check and see if there's any on, or Evelyn, I don't know if you've seen that. Are there any online?
No online.
No online. Okay. So with that, we will move on to, sorry, then I'm going to jump to changes to the agenda. Does anyone have any changes to additions? Okay. Then let's make a motion to approve the agenda. Can I
Move we approve the agenda.
second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Great. All in favor. Okay, for oral communication, we said we had no speakers, and we'll jump to 9.1, update on the facilities master's plan. Rick.
Good evening to the board, staff, and community. Tonight, we are going to present to the board an update on the facilities master plan and the process that started really at the end of last school year, but really got into full swing at the start of this school year. Joining me tonight is Aaron Jobson from QKA, the architectural firm who has been charged with producing the facilities master plan for Redwood City School District. And I'll turn it over to him to present the slides. Give me a second, Aaron, and I'll share them.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you all for having me back tonight. I'm excited to give you guys a quick update on what we've been working on. Here's our well-oiled machine of working together on this over the past few months, as Rick had said, with Rick and Martin from the district, and Eric and Nick and Ben from Ben Peltz, and myself and John and Hector from UK. And shout out to Willie, who kind of supports all of us and makes all this stuff happen in the background. Next. So today we just we always start with kind of a quick overview of the process that we're going through, just for folks that might be listening in for the first one of these updates. We wanted to spend a few minutes talking about what we call the indicators of quality, which we'll get into, and then a little bit of an update on upcoming community meetings and kind of our approval timeline, proposed approval timeline for the rest of this process, to walk through kind of the community input and how that's going to work itself in. And then take any questions that you might have. Next. So first, we're going to start with why this is important. Why are we doing this? And that really is because the quality of the facilities really matters to the quality of the education. And we know there are things that the district needs to improve in their facilities, and we want to maximize the impact on students of every dollar that we spend and get community and school input into that process. And that's really what we're here to do as part of the facilities master plan. Next. Just as a quick overview, master planning is really the first step in implementing facilities projects. There, we're really looking at general scope of the project, the kind of level of modernization, which buildings we might be replacing, things like that, the budget for those at a big picture level, and prioritization. And then we'll move into selected projects. We'll go into programming and into design, where we'll increase that level of detail and get all the way down to, what color the paint is and how many drawers are in the cabinets. And there is continuous stakeholder engagement throughout that process. So we always try to remind people that we will be back to talk about things in more detail as we get into individual projects. Next. This has been our overall schedule. So we started back in July doing our first phase, which is really gathering information. So visiting all the school sites and doing an assessment, doing an initial meeting to get input from the site committees at each school site, and reviewing the demographics and other background information across the district. And then in November and December, we went into kind of phase 2, which is really planning and design. So we take all that information we got, we put together an initial draft, initial idea of what that master plan might be, and then we review that with the site committee at each school site as well. And I think those meetings kind of rolled into early January as well. And then we've started into the last phase, which is really reviewing and finalizing that. So taking that information, finalizing the preliminary plans, setting those out for cost estimating, and then starting to look at project prioritization, which we'll get into tonight. Have a chance for you all to give some review and input, have some community meetings to allow opportunity for the broader community to give input, and then put the final documents together and bring them to you for approval, which we'll be working through this spring, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. Next. So one of the things that's always a challenge, with facilities master plans is working with public schools for 22 plus years. We've never had a project where we had enough money to do everything that we should do. And so figuring out what is most important and what is going to have the biggest impact is always a challenge, especially across a number of districts or a number of schools within a district, and how to do that equitably. So a tool that we've used for that for the last few years on a series of master plans now is what we call indicators of quality. And so we kind of identify 6 categories that we want to rate each project in, and kind of score them in each of those categories. And all this is really to assess their educational impact. That's really what we're after, is, again, maximizing the value of each dollar we have in terms of the impact it's going to have in the classroom on the students and their ability to learn. And so we have 6 categories. We weight those categories differently based on the needs of each district, based on the input that we hear from site committees, that we hear from you all, and that we hear from our executive committee team as well. And then we will actually score each project in each one of these categories. And typically our QKA staff does that based on all the feedback that we've heard. Right, based on our professional assessment, but also based on what we've heard in the site committee meetings. In each site committee meeting, we did a little exercise to gather their general priority of which projects are most impactful. And then we'll also gather some input on that in the community meetings, and that'll all go into those scores. So you can see at the bottom of this slide, this is kind of an example from a previous master plan of a project we might identify. So this is modernizing a classroom building. We identify some of the scope here. Here we're reconfiguring some available classrooms into transitional kindergarten and doing some other upgrades. There's a cost associated with it, and then you can see the indicators of quality there and those scores for that project. So that's kind of how we would typically present it, so that it's real clear and succinct package for each project, kind of what's involved, how much it costs, and what the impact is. Next. And so here are the 6 categories, or the 6 indicators. So we have educational programs, community support, learning environment quality, maintenance and operations, safety and security, and code compliance. There's a longer description of each of these. There was a description in a piece of the introduction that'll be in the master plan that was part of the packet that kind of gave a longer description, so I won't go into too much detail right now. But that max score that's the score that we do. So for each project, we'll give it a 1 to 10 score, and then it just gets multiplied times the weighting factor, which reflects kind of for what our initial response is for you all about what's most important for your district, and then that adds up to the total score. We managed to get this one to work out, so it's 100 points per project, so it's easy to relate to our ABCD grading scale and easy for everyone to understand. So that's kind of our initial pass at this. And I think one of the things we really always ask for board input on, and a good place to kind of target that upon, is that weighting column. Do we kind of get that correct as far as which categories are weighted the highest relative to each other, and kind of whether that looks like it reflects the priorities and the needs of Redwood City School District. So we can pause there. I don't know if there's any input or questions on that, if you want me to hold that until the end.
Questions, input, or thoughts on the rubric?
This is one of these areas where it might be helpful to learn a little bit more about the bucket. Like, so what goes into maintenance and operations, for instance? Like, what do these mean?
Yeah, so the maintenance and operations, for instance, is going to value things that are, like repairing the roofs. And some things are going to have a pretty high impact in multiple categories, like upgrading HVAC equipment is a maintenance issue, but it's also a learning environment quality issue. So that's going to score highly in both of those categories, right? Like each project is going to score in all the categories at different levels. Something that would score really highly in educational programs is TK classrooms, right? That's a facilities need that's going to meet an educational program need. So that's super important. And community support might be, something for expanding a gym to meet the needs of a community athletic partner or something like that. That's kind of thinking about what improvements you need to make for those community programs and community partners.
And I like the idea of weighting these. And so I like this system. It's very thoughtful. So thank you for that. Are you looking for input from the board in terms of the selected weights? Or I don't know if you could speak to the decisions around to weight the columns as you did?
Yeah, sure. And yes, that is kind of what we were looking for input on, is that weight row, I guess. So for what we really talked about is that the things that are going to have the biggest impact on students are going to be the educational program. So making sure we have facilities directly for that. I think that's pretty straightforward. The learning environment quality is important because we know that the quality of the space in a number of dimensions has a direct impact on students and their emotional state and well-being and ability to learn. And so that has a pretty direct correlation, and that has a high level. Maintenance and operations is really about protecting your long-term investment and making sure that we're addressing things when they come up and before they get to be a bigger issue, right? If we don't fix the leak in the roof, it becomes a much bigger issue down the road. So that's really kind of how that impacts learning, because if we don't spend the money on those things, they grow. Safety and security in this case is a lower rating because you've already done a lot of work on that. So that's not as high of a need. In many other districts, that has a higher need, which isn't to reflect its relative importance. It's more how much work there needs to be done there. And then code compliance really gets to like accessibility improvements. That's the major piece that comes into effect. Occasionally there are more kind of building code related things that come up that we notice, but for the most part, that's usually accessibility code requirements, which are important. Maybe don't have quite as direct of a correlation to impact on the learning environment. Does that make sense?
It does. I would just think that, the learning environment quality educational programs are like, that's really what the facilities are for.
Absolutely.
So those, in my view, would have much higher weighting than the other things are important. And I think it's awesome that we've made good progress on safety and security.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would expect to see even heavier weighting for, educational programs and learning environment quality.
Okay.
Anyone else? I like the rubric. I thought it was really thoughtful. And, safety and security, I agree, was something that historically had been much higher, especially for the Measure T fund. But it makes a lot of sense to have that lowered down to a 1 factor because so much had been invested in it. I think that the relative weights make sense. If you want to keep it at 100 points, I would keep it there. Otherwise, yeah, learning environment quality would be kind of the next one that I would toss a little more weight into. But
the same discussion we had when we were talking about this, preparing for this too, and we liked the idea of keeping it 100 because it just makes it easier for everyone to understand.
Yeah, it forces us to be a little bit more judicious in our weighting to say that you only have 100 points to allocate across them. So
that being said, it's not a magic number. You might have noticed the one before we had a total of 120 because we kind of came to to different conclusions. But so that's really open to whatever input. This isn't something that we necessarily need direction on tonight either.
Yeah.
And this isn't an action item. It's a discussion item.
Right,
So.
and I imagine that if we start seeing projects that, we're like, wow, that seems really awesome, but it's not scoring as high on it, and we realize it's because we didn't weight learning and environment quality, we can come back and revisit them in the.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say like it's not like we do a spreadsheet and sort by the thing and then everything. It's one factor in what will lead into decisions about which projects get funded, right? It's intended to kind of level that and help consider things across different contexts relative to each other and equitably, but it's not a mathematical equation. It's not the only factor.
Should we continue with the presentation? Thanks, Ken.
Sure. Next. So one of the other important next steps is the community forum meetings. So our goal here is to have multiple open meetings that are open to anyone, and we're still working on finalizing the kind of dates and the details of these. But the goal will really to provide information and gather some targeted feedback from anyone in the community who's interested in these projects and in the future of the school facilities. So in that meeting, we'll provide an overview of the process and the timeline, some of what I said earlier, but probably a little bit more detail that you've seen in the past. We'll talk about a draft facilities master plan for each school. So typically we'll kind of show the overall map and kind of walk through what the needs were. We'll start with kind of this is what the school looks like now. These are what the needs that we heard were. Here's our proposed plan and the major projects that we're proposing and why. And then we'll collect some data on which improvements community members feel are most important to the education. So again, informing the same kind of thing is that we're not going to go through ask people to score in each category, but it collect some general information and then answer any questions about the process and any specific school site plans. And if you go to the next one is an example from the previous master plan that we completed. We used Mentimeter in that forum to be able to allow folks to provide input. So after we went through the projects for Rancho Cotati High School, there were kind of those 8, 9 major projects, and so folks can use their phones or their laptops or whatever to vote, and they get 100 points to allocate to any of those projects however they want. And those the results show up live on screen as we're doing that. So it kind of mimics a little bit the decisions that you all have to make, right? You can't just make everything a 10, right? Everything has to be a little bit relative to each other. So it gives us a good feedback about what is most important. So in this case, the community felt like some of the lighting and drop-off improvements really important, but also classroom buildings, turf practice fields. So that's one other data point we get to kind of evaluate the priority of schools. Of the projects. We'll do that for each site. If you can see, we did it bilingually as well. So all the data is collected together in one pool, which makes the text a little bit small, but it's worth it. And that has worked really well. It's pretty easy. I don't know, you may or may not have actually worked with Mentimeter before, but it's a very simple, easy system to use with QR codes and everything else to make it easy to access. Next. So this is kind of our timeline from here to approval. So we kind of worked as an executive committee team to figure out kind of what's the right way to do this to make sure we have opportunity to get input from the community, but also give you all a chance to review and provide input to this document before you approve it. So currently at the beginning of the month, we sent a draft plan to our cost estimator to put numbers to each one of those items. So they're currently working on that. We're here to give you the update tonight. And then over the month of March, we're planning the community forum meetings. So we're working on scheduling those, getting that input during that time. And then that'll lead into a board study session sometime in April is kind of what we're thinking to have some dedicated time for all of you to ask questions and provide input. And we can have a good discussion about the proposed plans. And we'll publish a draft a week or two ahead of that. So you have some time to review it before that study session. And then targeting the May 14th board meeting to present that for approval. And then, of course, we'll try to publish that, as we said, like, a little more than a week to 2 weeks ahead of time. So there's adequate time for everyone to review that ahead of the approval. And so just making sure that we have all those time kind of pushes that out until May, but felt like that was kind of the right sequence and pace to make sure that we get all of the input and have an opportunity to incorporate it into the final draft. And I think that's it, right?
Great. Thank you, Aaron. I have one question before we jump to that's the last slide, right? I think it is. Yeah. Before we come to other board member questions on the community forum meetings, if I understand it right, there's going to be maybe 3 or 4 for the whole district as opposed to 1 at each site. And I think one of them is going to be online. Is that? Can you just say like?
Yeah, Rick, I was going to speak to that.
And also, if I'm saying anything, yeah. So the plan right now is to have at minimum 2 meetings. We're hoping to have 2 in person on opposite sides of the district to give opportunity for people to come hear the presentation by QKA, as well as provide feedback, and then also have one online version of that meeting or possibly an online hybrid meeting as well. That's what we're working on right now, along with days. It won't be 1 per site. It will be a general review, I believe, Aaron, at all sites during that meeting, but specific or more concentration with the sites closest to the area of the meeting, right? So the 5 or 6 sites there for that, and that will be taken into account as they deliver the final or the draft master plan for review in early April.
Yeah, we've done those community forum meetings. Sometimes, like you said, sometimes we'll divide it geographically so that person who's there for one meeting doesn't have to wait through the whole district to get to their school, right? So, but we're still working the details out for that to make sure that give people a chance to hear what they want to hear, right?
It makes sense. Yeah, I just wanted to be clear about that. Any questions or comments? David Lee.
Just to follow up on this, and this is probably getting ahead of it, but on the meetings and making sure that that's getting all the input from the different community members, is there a plan for ensuring that that's like getting out through different channels and stuff? Just like I imagine there's different communities that you still have to have one. Okay. Could you speak a little bit more to what the thinking is?
We'll be using all of the tools that we have in place, and we'll be working with Jorge Quintana about the ways that he reaches out to not only the school community, but the broader community as well. So you don't have to be a parent, a student, or a student in the district to participate or come to the meetings, but to give input for the facilities that are in your neighborhood that, as we know, add value to neighborhoods, are often a neighborhood gathering spot, right? And so we want to make sure that the community is involved as well.
Thanks, Cecilia or David Weekly.
Just obviously, thank you for the presentation. I really don't have any questions. I trust the process and look forward to it.
Thank you.
So I think it's great that we're going to be working on communicating this out broadly. We've gotten very good at communicating and making ourselves known. So I think that's wonderful. In terms of feedback on the weights, we already gave those. In terms of the columns, they seem reasonable. This is one of these things where the strength of the rubric is often tested in the actual practice of scoring things, right? Because you use the rubric, you score things, you're like, ooh, no, but that can't possibly be right. And then you go back and you update the column weights, right? That's as much the exercise as anything else. But I would imagine members of the public and maybe even some members of the board would be interested in like how do the rows get selected? So are there ways to go and suggest projects for inclusion in the FMP? Like, are we inheriting from the prior FMP and the things that didn't get done?
I mean, all of those are sort of pieces of information that have gone into the hopper to put this together, right? So we reviewed the previous master plan. The primary source is our site committee meetings, is having those discussions with the stakeholders at each school site. It's also our team walking each school site with Martin and his team. So to make sure we understand what the background needs are, what the kind of infrastructure needs are, right? So it's all of those pieces coming together into a plan that identifies the specific projects. We're also looking at the capacity and right-sizing the schools and things like that we've talked about before.
Now, let's say there's a member of the community who watches this recording or is on live stream right now who thinks like, oh, I've got a great idea for what the district needs to get around to building or doing with the facilities in the next 10 years. How can they get involved with the process?
Sure. Coming to the community meetings is a great way to do that. I think that also if there's an issue they want to raise at a specific school site, I think Rick probably directing that to the principal at that school site would probably be the best way to get that information to us.
And the principal would make sure that request was relayed to you and included.
Yeah, they'd relay it through Rick and Martin, and that would come to us, and we'd make sure to incorporate that information and evaluate that as, definitely doesn't mean everything that's suggested gets in the plan, but it's all things that we consider as part of the process.
Well,
For sure.
there goes my mini golf course. But thank you.
Yeah, there you go. I don't think that would rank super high on there. Right?
Cool. Thank you so much.
Huh?
All right, great. One last process question. Is the study session already on our calendar? Is that something we'll be talking about later?
Yeah, sorry. The date. Yeah, we're looking at April 23rd.
April 23rd. Okay, great.
I said the 24th.
I believe that's if that's the Wednesday.
The Wednesday between board meetings at the end of April. Yeah.
23rd.
Okay. I was saying, I think,
And normally that starts at 6 o'clock.
great. Thank
Okay.
you, Aaron.
Yeah,
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. Oh, Rick, please.
I just like to say, we did have the CBSC last night and we had a discussion about this. And I thought there was one really relevant question that I think would be good for the board to hear tonight too is, there was a comment made, and a question that followed around, the timing of the approval of the facilities master plan being in May. And I believe one person remembered that originally it had been maybe February or March with approval. And would that hamper or prohibit any projects moving forward? And so just to share with everyone here, that does not, because we already have our projects selected for this summer. So the projects that will be identified in beyond HVAC and lighting are projects that we wouldn't have started until the summer of 2026.
Yeah.
Right. So the May timeframe and the May approval is not going to hurt or hinder the bond program moving forward. As we know, we have the HVAC project going that's going to go out to bid next week. And the lighting project that's set, products are set to land in the next couple of weeks with that starting in late March or early April. So I just wanted to share that as well.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks for that update.
Hmm.
All right, Aaron. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
the presentation. Really appreciate
Okay.
it.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to our school and community reports. We have 10.1, the annual update to the local control accountability plan. Anna, I'm going to hand it off to you, right? Yeah.
Thank you. So far. Thank you. Today, we're going to be going over the local accountability, LCAP mid-year reports. I do want to thank my team for Ed Services because a lot of their work came into looking for the data, collecting it, and making sure that it was prepared in the document for you tonight. So thank you. And I know some of them are online and some are right here in person, so they'll be available to if you have any questions. Just as a quick reminder, this is our LCAP is a 3-year plan that describes our goals, actions, services, and expenditures. And really our goal is to improve student successes. It aligns with our state priorities and make sure we are designing support for all students, especially our unduplicated pupils, which are English learners, foster youth, and low-income students. We want to make sure that LCAP ensures that funding is used effectively to address our students' needs. And of course, our goal is to close the achievement gap. So our new LCAP was developed, starting last year, just as a side note there on the bottom to make sure that it's a 3-year implementation of the goals that we set. And so we look at progress, incremental progress every year from the start of the baseline data. So again, just a quick reminder that our LCAP is just a document that's internalized to all our stakeholders to make sure that we are operating equity and that we are set forth all the actions that we have in our LCAP. And so this meeting tonight and of sharing the information is really to see where we are in that process as a mid-year checkpoint. So tonight we're going to be reviewing our 3 goals. Again, the LCAP, our LCAP goals are goal number 1 is focus on attendance and suspension. And it's one of our largest goals that has a lot of mini action plans in it to support our actions to support attendance and suspensions and our social emotional learning for students. Our goal 2 is multilingual learners. And again, looking at our large numbers of students that we have in the district. And then our goal 3 is academics. So I provided this because there's so many acronyms in education. So for those of you who are on the document, you can see there's a lot, and this is just some of them. But just want to make sure for people who are reading don't understand our acronyms. So just to quickly, this is our California dashboard. This is one of our really one of our key elements that we use for creating the LCAP. It is given to us by the California. So last year, I just want to show the data for last year to this year, because this is really important, because when we look at developing our LCAP, we have to look at our indicators, our red indicators, and making sure that we are looking at our subgroups. Right now, we were in directed assistance by the county from last year because of one subgroup. And to get into that, you have to have 2 years where those students have dropped. So our subgroups was for African Americans. As you can see, there were we had chronic absenteeism and suspension. They were in 2 categories. So last year and this year, we will continue to monitor them throughout the plan. So we are really focused in on what that looks like. This year, if you look at 24-25, we have our red indicators. We are out of direct assistance, but we can always fall back in because it's all based on a 2-year cycle. So we need to be monitoring all of our red indicators. And so I put them here because this is also when we start looking at our new LCAP, not our new LCAP, but look at our action plans. We want to make sure that we're taking in consideration who we need to be monitoring. And some of these are also things that I've been working with the principals on their SIPSs. Because as we are looking at our groups, we have some target groups that are smaller than others. And so we need to make sure we have action plans in the SIPSs that actually target those groups, especially if they're at specific sites. So this is some of our guiding information that we use for the LCAP. Again, this is just a quick reminder of we're at 62% of students that are unduplicated pupils, which means they are free and reduced, foster, homeless, immigrant, and English learners. We have several sites that are at 90%. Part of our goals in the LCAP is to make sure we are supporting our underserved communities and students. So I actually provided, it's not moving, last year, so you can do a comparison. So we're going to hit into goal 1, which is kind of a hefty goal because it covers attendance, chronic absence, and social emotional learning. We really want to improve our attendance. Our chronic absenteeism is at 3% each year. This is an area that continues to be a struggle as we look at our data. Improved attendance by 2%. Again, we have some groups that have met that, and we have groups that we're maintaining, and we have, we're at 1% when you look at our data, and reduced suspension, which has been one of our big highlights that we have been working on in our goal this year. So when we look at our attendance rate, again, we are about 1% right now, and this is the data from 2/11. Our goal really is to be at 95.3, and then in 3 years be at 99. It's an area where if we can maintain this will be very helpful so it doesn't get us into differentiated assistance. But if you look at our homeless, we've really had some changes in homeless, which that has been an area that we haven't really had a big red indicator, but it is an area where we have had an increase of students in our homeless population, in our insecurity and housed. So we have actually gone up on that. So it's really good that they're able to maintain the attendance at where they're at. We hope that that will continue. Again, we're monitoring our African Americans because they're at 92. Right now they're at 91. So it can fluctuate within the year. And so we know that in looking at our data just recently, Antonio and I were looking at it, January and December, we had these huge dips at all the sites. And it was probably because of the flu. So again, and then we had these spikes back up in February, like right now. So all of it comes into how the ebbs and flows of attendance throughout the year. So we're hoping that by the end of this cycle in the new report at the end of the year, we'll hopefully be able to see how well we did. But we're hopeful that we're making some improvements. This is just a quick segment so you can see, we know that our schools are making improvements. We have a lot of schools in yellow. We have green, and then we have one outlier for attendance. That is a school that we're working with quite heavily in trying to make improvements. It's a middle school. And looking at the data just recently, I was looking at all our comparison of our school sites, especially middle school. Our 8th grade classes tend to have a lot more students who don't attend. So that's just all the middle schools. It's just that McKinley's is one that's indicated. In terms of our chronic absenteeism, this is another area again that we need to be monitoring. We're sort of stable right now in our complete district. We need to go in, decrease this number. So our EL, we've been able to decrease 1%, but then you look at our long-term English learners and we're back up. It's a big spike. We're talking about 200 something kids. Again, most of those are middle school. So long-term English learners are 7 years in the district as an English learner. So those are students in 7th and 8th grade. Our homeless, again, a nice dip there. And then our foster youth, actually a nice dip there. So again, we're trying to decrease these numbers. And so we've had some good, we want to maintain those and that those continue to maintain, at least for the homeless and our foster youth. Again, our African Americans, we need to continue to monitor. So we have these ebbs and flows throughout attendance. So again, just quickly, so you can see by sites what that looks like for chronic absenteeism for 2 years. This slide here is our red indicator. So I really wanted to showcase because this is one of the areas we really needed to work on for our African Americans. And then again, we're monitoring Pacific Islanders. We don't want that to, because they're not big subgroups. We have 28 identified African Americans and we have 49 identified Pacific Islanders. So they're not huge numbers. And so that's why even 1 or 2 that go down brings us all down. So we need to be monitoring these students and our SIPSA goals and what we're doing for attendance. So we really want to make sure to maintain or, right now our Pacific Islanders are at 92 and African Americans are at 92 in this, when we took this data. So the next slide, you can see our African Americans are sort of like these dips and lows. You can see where they're at right now. So February, we're back up at 97. But you can see that overall, we have had some good steady above from last year for our African Americans, which is really good. We want to make sure we keep that for those students. The same goes for our Pacific Islanders, making sure that we're continuing to maintain that because we don't want to be in it again next year at the end of the year and then it be said, we're told you have to monitor this group. So really trying to make sure that we are working with our staff and our principals about identifying and working with those students that are attendance. Suspensions, we made a lot of progress. We are very pleased to see that we have gone down. There's always work to do in suspensions. But overall, our suspensions has shown a lot of good growth. I want to say that's been a lot of the work from Antonio working with the school principals. And that really started a lot of that work last year in identifying why we were suspending kids. What were the reasons? And him working with those principals to figure out long-term, alternatives. And one of the largest things that got us in 23 was vaping. And so now we have alternatives to vaping and less of that being a suspendable. So we were suspending a lot for vaping the year before, where this year it's not one of our big suspensions. It's mostly fights that are suspendable that we're seeing. So again, a lot of good growth, but of course we would love to have 0 in all of them. So just a quick graph about where you can see where they're at in 24. We've definitely had a big dip right there, and we hope to continue that. And as you can tell, because suspensions for our African American, we are really low at an African American right now. So which is and we don't have any suspensions for African Americans. So that is really good because we're maintaining and making sure that that subgroup is being addressed. So again, we continue to work on our PBIS district-wide. Antonio has been really working with the sites and making sure they're implementing PBIS model and meeting with their staffs and really creating a system of change at the sites as well. So there's been a lot of support on his behalf in making sure that the school sites that are implementing year 1 and year 2 are doing that work and that groundwork. And he's been a lot at MIT recently as well. So, and I say MIT because as you see this graph, we were looking at the data. This MIT I know is an outlier, but I do want to say from December to now, there has been a huge decline. So there has been some systems that have been put into place. There's been a lot of good. They were looking at data today in their PBIS team. So this again was a lot of the behaviors that were happening at the beginning of the year. And so now we are seeing a decrease, and we hope that we will continue to see that decrease in behaviors as spring comes, because spring comes and a lot of things happen. But we're hoping that that will continue. So there's been a lot of steady growth at MIT, even though it's an outlier right now. There has been a lot of work that's being done and systems being put into place. So we are seeing a lot of improvement there. Again, just by grade level, 6th and 8th graders. 7th grade, not so much, same as last year. Last year, 8th grade was the same last year for whatever reason. That's our 8th graders. Again, we have our opportunities. We have to put into alternatives. And so you could see from last year to this year how many kids we've had in other placements. We have 11. Some of those are, you can see 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Again, 8th grade being a class of needing support. This has been super helpful when we're looking for an alternative. Again, Antonio meets the Opportunity School team, which is a teacher and a counselor, meet with the staff prior to going. They really try to be proactive at students that are identified and they monitor them. So it's a good program in terms of monitoring so that we're not bringing them to the alternative school, but keeping them in the school and doing check-ins. Again, our homeless, our McKinney-Vento students, we have a large number. As you can see from this graph, we've actually gone up. And I think it's because we have better system to identify our students and unduplicate, temporarily doubled up. So you can see that doubled up number has gone up increasingly over time, where before we weren't capturing it as well as we are now in our system. So we're at 97.39 are doubled up. We have some in temporary shelters. Most of our students, though, are families that live together in shelter, in homes. So again, this is a target group that we work with and that we want to make sure that we're supporting. We also have behavior specialists when behaviors arise in the general education, because we have our special education, but we also have general ed. So we also have some behaviors who help support sites when there are egregious behaviors that are happening. It could be a one-off. It could be a student that just needs some regulations and strategies. So we have behaviors that are going out, our techs that are going out to help support staff. This year, we did not do the student voice, but we are doing a climate survey with students. So the following information is all students, it's all student information. It wasn't teachers. I should have put student fall comments of my error, but we decided to do this because last year when we did the voice, we sort of took their questions and said, this year, let's try to see how they're at, and we're going to gauge it with the new California Healthy Kids one to see where we're at. And so these questions are exactly the same, except for one on there that it added because last year the kids kept bringing that up in that. So you can see there's a lot of good positivity. Of course, we would love to have 80s and 90s, right? That's what we strive for. But last year we were at lower numbers in some of these. So this is the start of the year. So again, one of the things that the students were asking for last year was number 14. They were asking in the student voice, they wanted more collaborative projects. So this again was done in October. And so we can see that there are some collaborative projects that now students are feeling they're doing, really trying to listen to them and see where areas that we need to work on. And of course, as we look at solving conflict is one of the areas we still need to work on and restorative practices. Okay, so then we have a lot of social emotional support that has been happening with PD. Again, another service that we have is our community schools, which we have 8 at. And so I just want to highlight the amount of work they've been doing. As you can see on this slide, there's so much that goes into our community school and there's the sites that they're serving. We have many students in our expanded learning programs that work with our community through our community. We have a lot of mentoring, we have tutoring that we do as well. And what they provide. So you can see there's a lot of work that goes into what is happening at the community schools and consistent monthly second food harvests, emergency essentials, all of these things that come into play to help support and wraparound services. Okay. One of the things that we have that's new that really came on this year is the Thrive program, which is really working with students who are experiencing insecurity in home. And so those are at our Garfield, Hoover, MIT, and Taft. So you can see there's 49 referrals. And so they have active 35 of those families are currently being served as students. So that's new through a grant. And so we also have our mental health, as we've been very fortunate to have a really robust mental health program. As you can see, all of the schools are receiving, these are the ones that we have, and we hope to continue next year. I know that Ana Paula has been working on providing more interns as well. So all our sites have some form of mental health. So she has just provided us some data so you can see throughout these slides, you know, how much counseling is actually happening at each of the schools throughout the week and what she had last year and this year, so you can see the increase. So a lot of the work is being done on tier 1 interventions. You can see Kennedy is an outlier there that has a lot more, and part of that is just the check-ins that happen at middle school. Mental health supports. This is the check-in by provider. You can also see this is just quickly check-in. So most of our counselors get the counseling check-ins, the daily check-ins, and we have some One Life. And then individual therapy, we have more of those on the other. One Life has a lot more, but because our CSD is actually doing more check-ins and opportunities for those daily. And then you can see it by school site. Again, then we also have group therapy that is happening. Of course, we would see that happens more in the elementary level than at the middle school. So it's similar to last year. Our crisis where we're having more is, of course, middle school, Kennedy and MIT. And then these are the type of crises that we're seeing. These are similar to last year, but you can see that we've sort of switched a little bit more suicidal versus extreme emotional distress from last year. So that's a change. Okay, so we also have through the grant, we also have trauma-based training that was at Kennedy, Hoover, Garfield, and Taft that are running groups as well. Okay, so lots of mental health support for all of the sites. And then to close out goal 2, we have our MTS TOSAs who also provide lots of supports, and they're overseeing our student success teams, our screen teams. They're working with the attendance teams, and then working with the school sites to create the plans and looking at data analysis and supporting and all of the work. So there's a lot that has gone into goal 1. In fact, I think when we look at the budget, goal 1 has a big budget because there's so many health supports on that area. Moving into Go 2, we have, of course, our English learners. We want our students to really make progress. This is an area where we really need to work at and have been working at. We want to make sure we're increasing our rates and decreasing how many LTELs we have. So we are currently in the process of doing LPAC, so we don't have our current data as to where we are. 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, 3rd through 8th grade just did their group work this month of February, and then they're doing all the one-on-one. So we're hoping that should be done by May 30th. That's our deadline. So our projections are, our goal is 55, so just moving back each year. So our goal this year is to have 44.25, make some progress, right? Our reclassification rate is 4%, looking at where we want it to be. Again, we don't have that data because we don't have RFEP right now. And then we really need to reduce our LTELs, were our goal. We need to reduce that number. And so again, it's in progress, but you know, this is so you can see where all our English learners are. We have 2,153 of them. There's a lot of students, and you can see where they swing towards and where they're at. So you can see the numbers. You can also know that this year we have invested lots into our professional development with making sure we have coaching models. We have sites that are our priority sites. We have today, in fact, we had one of our TCM coaches happening at Garfield yesterday and today at Roosevelt, and really digging deep and planning with teachers at those sites. So we have had a lot of that happening throughout the year. Because Garfield and Roosevelt were CSI sites, they have been impacted with 5 cycles versus 3 like the other sites. So we're hoping to continue some of that work next year. You can't stop one year and you have to continue. And then from our dashboard, again, we know that our English learners we need to have them make more progress. So right now, when you look at this dashboard, we have 48.9 as ELs, and then you look at our LTELs, because now we have to start monitoring our LTELs, right? Even though there's only 239 students, we still have to monitor them because they are 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So you can see where they're at and the distribution at the sites in the middle school. Then we also provide outdoor education, which is the fee is about $510. So we're looking at the allocation as schools are going. You can see the dates on there. Garfield already went. Taft, Roosevelt, and Hoover are upcoming. So as we look at the need, that number, or just an estimate of what the need may be, it may be even higher for some. I'm still waiting on those from the numbers from the schools. And again, we have our newcomer supports, which are part of our English learners, and that continues. Again, we have a number of them. I think, I'm trying to remember what I counted. Earlier, there's just a huge amount of kids everywhere, but you can see, of course, K1 is heavy. And you can see how many are having our middle school, which was where we have our newcomer at the sites of Kennedy, McKinley, and at Hoover. That's where we have teachers. And then again, you can see the site level, which sites are heavily impacted by our newcomers. And you can see that Hoover has K2, 3, 5, and 6 and 8th grade. They're pretty heavily impacted, more so than other sites. Okay, so going into Go 3, this is an area again that we really need to work on, and we've been working on all year. We want to make growth in this because our English learners are really, really low, and that's an area we are working with, and that's why some of the PD we've been working on has been addressing this year. So for our projections, because we haven't done iReady will begin in March, so we will have that data later in April. But this is our projection for iReady, so that we can see that growth we have seen being stagnant at 53 pretty much for the last 3 years. So we're hoping this year will be a bump now that we went down to 2 assessments. But we will see. I'm hopeful. And then again for math, in math, we were in the 40s for the last 3 years. Pretty similar. And then CASP, again, we want to hit that 50 mark and hopefully even higher if we can. We would love to be able to be up at the 60s. The more we can achieve, the better. We know we're working a lot, but we definitely, if you look at our English learners, though, how low they are. And that really is an area that we really need to work towards to get those scores improved overall, and as well as our LTELs. They're super low. Okay, so this really just shows that we have a gap, and it's it's a visual. It's not a fun visual to look at, but it's the gap, right? It's an understanding. So again, we're similar in math, a little higher for our English learners, but still we have a lot of work to do. And again, the gap is very similar to what we need to close. So we're working towards that with everything that we're putting into place. This year, we've done a lot of work around integrated ELD in our priority sites. We put the cohesion slide deck and having priorities about what we need to focus on. As you all know, we're all at sites every week, working with principals, observing classrooms, giving feedback to really help lift not only our administrators, but really know that we're checking and see what teachers are doing and how we can improve our practice for next year as we begin to plan. I think we're hopeful with all the PLC work that we've been doing. It's been a lot. We've done a lot of that data analysis and really laying the foundation this year. We're hoping that now that we've laid the foundation, teachers are looking at data consistently every 6 weeks, that next year this will be a lot stronger as we move forward and have better systems for our assessments as well. So I'm very hopeful that we're moving in the right trajectory. It's going to take time to get out of the hole we're in because I feel like we're very low, but am hopeful that we're doing a lot to put into place to move our student groups, especially our English learners. And so I actually just added the CASP one because it's not on the dashboard yet. There's a lot of movement about where it's at, but I just wanted us to remind, this is still on possibly start next year or the following year. So we really need to start monitoring what we're doing. So it's a goal for next year to really dive a little bit more deeper into our standards for science for 4th and 5th grade, as well as we know 8th grade has, but really our 4th and 5th grade. Okay. Again, the standards just show a gap too, right? So we have a gap everywhere. So really trying to work towards what we need to do. And I wanted to say the SARC number and the approximate 75 was Wendy and I were having a conversation, and maybe it fluctuates between 70, 71, 75. We were trying to get that number. So knowing that we still have teachers who are interns and not fully credentialed, and again, that hinders some of the work that we're trying to do. They're working really hard at really supporting the classrooms, but it also there's a lot of work to do when you don't have credentialed teachers in the classroom. It's 25% of some of them, across the district. So again, a lot of professional development this year, similar to last year, and we will continue. We are sending staff now to different conferences as well to build their knowledge. So we're looking forward to some of that. Coming back, we have cuts, our CABE is our bilingual conference. So we have, we're going, Garfield, we have some teachers from Garfield going, we have Adelante going, and then we have TAF going. And then Learning in the Brain, we know NSA is going to that. And we were trying to hopefully get Orion and Roy Club, but they had some hiccups there to go. But we're hoping that next year when they're in San Francisco, we could probably hopefully send some more groups from other sites as well. It's in New York. And then we'll be attending the MTSS conference just to build our own knowledge again, to continue the work. And again, we've done a lot of deep digging, working at where we need to go. We had a goal of writing PLC that just did not take off this year. But we know next year, one of our focuses will be writing and reading comprehension. That's across the district. That's what I need. So we know we'll be working on that. And then moving more into sciences as well in the elementary. So again, a lot of things that we've put into place and looking at what we're doing for tier 1. In the next, we're hoping to be able to share in our end of the year report, literally actually has some of our reading data. So we're hoping that we'll be able to have it ready for the end of the year. It's working on our platform and for us on Powers Analytics, so we can see some of what's happening in first, second, and third grade in terms of their reading. But it's not up to the system yet. And so the data is a little skewed. So Branya and I've been working on that. So we're hoping to have that for the end of the year for you guys. So you can see where some of our reading, and just another capture of our reading data. Okay. All right. And then again, our CSI sites have all coaches and our ATSI have supports. So a lot of work into those coaching that we've provided to help support and reduce and support our classes. But the good thing is our CSI schools got out of CSI, our ATSI schools, except with the exception of MIT, all got out this last year. So that's a great highlight, a lot of work that has been done. It's just we have one MIT that we're going to be working on closely for next year as well. Okay, any questions?
Thank you, Anna, for the presentation. There was a lot of information in there. Also, I'll remind everyone that there was the 2-page budget as an attachment there. So let's open it up to discussion or questions as the slide says. Cecilia, please start.
And I'll start because as you said, well, first of all, thank you to your team, to the teachers, to the paraprofessionals that are in the classroom, to everyone that actually contributes to the improvement of our students or the progress that our students are making. And obviously, as we've talked about it before, it's not what we all want to see, but we're moving the needle. And so I do appreciate that. And then I just have one question. When you first started the presentation, you mentioned the LTELs, our seventh and eighth graders.
Six. Some are identified so it's 7-year criteria. It used to be 6-year. So it moved to 7-year criteria. So it could be some 6th graders because we used to test TK. We no longer test TK.
And then of course, they could be LTELs, even if they came, say, from another district, because they're just English learners in this country. Not necessarily that they started with us and they haven't progressed in the
That is
7
correct.
years.
Yeah, so
Okay.
they could have moved into here and they were in the California system already as a kindergartner, coming in as a 7th or 8th grader.
Okay. And again, I don't have any more questions. Thanks to everyone, obviously, for making those phone calls, to meeting with the families, to meeting with everyone that needs to be involved. I really appreciate what you guys are doing. And again, being hopeful.
I will echo the same. There's a bunch of work, obviously, that's going on, and it's super important. So really appreciate it. I will also say I was nervous seeing the size of the slides, and I'm very impressed that we were able to get through them very quickly. So thank you on that. I do want to make sure that for this, like I'm getting a good sense of where we are. I think of this point as a gut check or a sense check on like, or do we feel we're on track? If not, do we need to redirect, et cetera? And I know that the LCAP is a huge document, and you simplified it, but I've tried to go through it to understand all the different pieces. And so I'll go maybe one by one, the goal one by one. So I think I saw for the LCAP goal 1, there are 6 different metrics that where we have set targets. And I think it's attendance rate, chronic absenteeism, suspension, expulsion, dropout rate, and then kind of this school climate sort of catch-all. So I think what I caught was attendance rate. Seems like we are on track, maybe like a little bit looking pretty good. Suspension rate looking on track. I think separately expulsion and dropout, you told me like not only are we on track, I mean we're very good. So
0.
that's great. And then I guess the last 2, this I know that you gave some data on the school climate piece. I haven't put the time in. Is it do we feel like that is on track or?
So we moved away. So we used to do panorama survey in the last couple of years, and we used to do it twice a year, and the data really wasn't showing. And it was we had a lot of even the board was like, some of the questions that are being asked on there are kind of, so we moved away to our this is the first year we're actually administering California Healthy Kids. So in order for us to have a baseline, we wanted to make sure we had something at the beginning of the year to see, specifically for students. Because what we found in the data for the panorama, we had a lot of low markers, like favorably 30s, favorably 40s. But when we started looking at, we went deep into the questions and met with them. We were like, well, these questions are a little skewed. They would ask it here and then they would change the wording here. So kids could always look at that as it's nationally normed. So it's a little skewed. And so we were trying to really look at how can we have less questions. And then we were asking if we could reword the questions because we were going through it as second language learners. I was like, with my second language learner cap, I'm like, wait, they're asking this question. What does this look like for someone who's learning the language? And what would it look like in translation? It doesn't translate very well. We have to do that. So we were finding all kinds of things as we started digging deeper. So we decided, we looked at California. So we moved into California. So we just are doing that now. It's currently, and we're only doing it through 4th through 8th grade this year for the next couple of years.
Okay.
So we were just finding our numbers were really low in terms of, it wasn't very favorable in terms of how the students were feeling about school because there were so many questions.
Okay. So on that specific metric, we are kind of re-baseline now, and part
Correct.
because we switched to the
Correct.
Okay. So put that on pause.
Yeah.
And the last one, which is like something that I think we need to see, is the chronic absenteeism, which based on the numbers you showed me, I think the answer is no, we're not on track.
No, not in chronic.
And based on the data, the big ones that's sticking out are LTELs and MIT, and perhaps the combination of those. There's a lot of newcomers. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think the chronic absenteeism is something we have looked at. In fact, yesterday, Dr. Baker and we addressed this with the county about, we have some kids who are, and Tanya was working with one today about, we have some kids who are refusing to come to school, right? We have a group of students who are refusing, and how do you get them in school? We have students who in the middle school specifically will say, I'm going to school, and they're walking to school, don't make it to school, and then come second, third period. So you just have a mixture of things that are going on. Especially, I think a lot of it is across the board, but we do have some students that are refusing. We were just trying to figure out, is anything in immigration really hindering us? What we see, we don't see it right now. We haven't really been able to track that yet in terms of our students, because a lot of our students, when we were looking at we have students that are at 50 all the way to about 95. And we're talking hundreds in each of the school sites and that are considered chronically absent. So just at MIT, it's 116. At Kennedy, it's 120. At Hoover, it's 100. So that chronic absenteeism, because it doesn't take you much to get into that category.
Got it.
And so 3 absences are here, but then you get into 10 absences and boom, you're already considered chronically absent. So it doesn't really take you much to get into that category.
Yeah.
And so it's how do we, and once you're in there, you're after 10 absent, you can't get out of it. It's considered that
Yep.
way the rest of, even though you may come to school the rest of the year, you're still getting the letter.
Yep.
So that's also part of the system. So it's hard to get out when you've already been at 80% of the day, even though they may be coming, that number stays stagnant.
Got it. So is it possible that like we have these numbers? That doesn't mean once you hit that point, we kind of can't fix it for the year because you're
It's
just there.
kind of hard at this point of year.
Okay.
At this point.
Okay.
So one of the things, some of the
You
schools.
can't fix, sorry, you can't fix the categorization as chronic obviously we should still do the
Work,
work and it sounds like
yes.
we're doing work. Okay.
Because there's a certain degree to which I feel like there's reporting requirements and there's the things the state considers important, right? And so the state came up with this definition of chronically absent, not us.
Correct.
We can say it's a proxy for something that's very important. Contestant must be present to win, right? The children must be in the classroom to actually receive the benefit of the instruction there, right? But it's almost like what we're looking for is more of a continued indicator rather than a Boolean state about whether or not a given student is chronically absent. So that we want as many instructional hours delivered as possible, right?
Correct.
And it makes me think that if we could have a way of tracking that and optimizing for that, that's really what we're shooting for.
I don't want to get into
Yeah.
It is helpful for me to understand that that is the situation we're in now, and I get that. And I guess the next question is, putting aside if we have this group that is kind of where they are because you hit it and then you're one for the rest of the year. It sounds like we are doing a lot of work on that front. Do we
Lot of
feel like we have changed that dynamic state where
I'll let Antonio answer
With
that.
with a few kids,
So,
yes,
yeah.
we have. But as Anna pointed out, when we were meeting with the county yesterday, and it was all about the
The
LCAP.
African Americans.
And we were talking about LCAP and where we are and how we're progressing. We brought this up. We said we have some students. No matter what we do, we meet with the parents. We have the counseling in place that are not still coming to school, and the parents have kind of said, thrown up their hands and said, "We're sorry, we can't help you."
Yeah.
Antonio's going to take them to SARB, and I said, school attendance review board. I go, they're not going to attend. So how's that going to help us? So we brought this up yesterday, and I guess the county is working on trying to have something more teeth at the county level. And what that will look like, I don't know. They've hired a gentleman, I guess, to work with them in this manner for these students who are having this difficult time and don't have the support systems in place at home to get them to school.
Like Uncle Vinny comes to your house with a metal pipe and says, like, you better send this kid to school, or like.
I think it's to try to, because I think one of the things that happened, right, there used to be, and Antonio, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you've been doing this a lot longer than I have, but there used to be a punitive part of a court, right? That no longer exists. They took that out already. And so, not that it ever worked anyways, but at least you had a little leverage on it. And so we have no leverage anymore. And I think that leverage, not having that leverage or a little bit of it, getting a little fear, we just are not making progress. We do have kids though, who do come out. I think that's one thing we haven't tracked, how many kids have actually come out that really have made a difference. And we're seeing that. Unfortunate part on our data and the way it's stated is because they've already reached a certain level, you never get out of it.
Right, but that's kind of what I was saying. It's
that's
like there's the mandatory
counterproductive.
data that we have to
Yes,
collect and we have to report. That's not optional, fine.
Yeah.
But like it makes me curious if there are other things that we should be looking at.
Yeah.
Like, can we get somebody back on track and give ourselves credit for that mid-year, even if the county and state
Yeah.
don't?
I think we haven't tracked it, David, so it's something we need to start tracking with our TOSAs and with the work that we're doing, because they are doing a lot of work, and so
Right.
it would be interesting, we just need to start tracking it about how many kids they actually get out of that really come back in, and we are making progress at that, so that is really good data, and I think it's something we can work on.
Yeah, because there should be high fives for if
Yeah.
the hard work that people are putting in is effective and the students are returning to school, it's like, even if they've already been labeled as chronically absent, like, I want to know that and I want to cheer that.
And it's something we can definitely aim for and see what we can come up with, because the schools are putting so much emphasis. For example, Wendy and I were at Hoover was it last week? It was the last week, right? And we got to experience the screen team. And the screen team was, the counselor, the principal, the dean was there, special ed, middle school, and so forth. And they were going through each of these students, and I think there were like 50 students on this. Not that they were absent or anything, but there was something that was impeding their education. And they went through it with a fine-tooth comb and what they were going to do to move it forward. It's a lot of work to put into place, but that is also something that we need to be able to track and have data that's moving the needle with these kids.
I'll say I'm with Trustee Weekly. That'd be helpful. I also want to be mindful of not creating new reporting requirements. At least, we got to prioritize anyways, but yeah, I think point taken. The only other thing on the chronic absenteeism is, like, I get it. I would note one, like, Taft is killing it. It looks like huge gains, so that's awesome. I think Garfield had pretty significant gains as well. Like,
Yeah, they do.
we're doing really great work, and I just want to recognize that.
Mhm.
But yeah, we still clearly have
And-
something else to solve.
And one of the things they have is an actual outreach specialist that works with some of the families because of the grant. So we have another additional person through the grant that they have for the community schools, that we're able to provide an extra resource that really does work with some of these families a little bit more. And that, they work in conjunction with the screen team, but it's targeted towards them. Hoover has the dean as well. So they do home visits, they do all of that work to really try to get the families back into school.
That's really good to know. All right. I'm happy to go on because we've gone through goal 1, but I also don't want to monopolize the time, so maybe we'll take a break. Anyone else want to?
You're asking a good question, Pam. I don't think it's always.
Yeah, offers open.
Celia, please.
That's what happens when you do discussions. When you talk about the kids are obviously truant, right? And you're talking about hundreds. And then you also mentioned there's some kids that are struggling or having a hard time or
Yeah.
just don't want to attend. Are those, like, let's say 100, the truant, but in reality, maybe 20 of those are the ones that don't want to come, 80 are truant for other reasons, they're just absent a lot? Is that just more of a clarifying question?
Antonio, because you've been working on that a lot more than I have.
It is true to what you're saying. It varies based on, the school situation. Some students, due to mental behavioral health, they just are not able to attend school. And I see we have a high number of those students. And then if you place those students, they might have an active IEP. So that, apports to the same kind of like two different groups with the same chronic absenteeism. And that group of students might be an English learner. So you have these chronic absent students under these 3 different categories. So in sense of numbers, I haven't looked about, 20% of the students are,
True.
mental behavior truant, or the other 80% are just not wanting to come to school. So I can look at it and share that with you about specific numbers, but I want to say that we had put into, a lot of effort. The school, we had monthly meetings, attendance meetings. So the school get together. So I get to attend at each different school once a month. And when they go over the data, they have a very specific numbers, connected with the mom, connected, the student. We invited the student. So there are many different reasons of the absences. And this is a great opportunity to categorize those. Mental health. I just don't want to come to school. I'm afraid to come to school. It's anxiety on my end, or because there are different categories. But we can work on it and do that kind of categorization of the reason for the students that are under the truancy group and the reasons why.
And then let me tell you what my reasoning for the question. I'm wondering if some of those students are absent because let's just say they weren't feeling good, whatever the reason was. And it's hard for the parent to send them to school to know that they're going to be called within the next hour or two because they're really not feeling well and the parent is not able to pick up the kid from school and therefore they just leave them at home. I'm just wondering if we have some of those.
That I
cases.
don't recall hearing about those, probably, minimal number, because actually what the schools are saying, if your child says, I have a headache, we have a nurse at school. The nurse can check, and because we want them back, we want them at school. So we're actually, I don't think so. I don't think that, oh, they're gonna call me anyways to pick him up. No, I don't think that's one of the reasons. And if it is, it's very minimal.
Yeah, you want to continue? I'll point out that we've been on the topic for 45 minutes, but I think this is an important one. I think 40 minutes was a little bit light on the agenda, so I think, but please.
I'll apologize in advance. Sorry, on goal one, the only thing I forgot to mention was I did see that spike in the suicide ideation. That's super concerning, and it's consistent with what I think we heard in another committee earlier. Do we know is this broader than our district? Like, do we have any sense of what is behind that?
It's
I know Ana Paula's on.
about
Ana Paula's on the
it's
chat.
not only Redwood City
Yeah.
School District.
I'm sure.
When we are superintendents get together, that's one of the items that we've been talking about quite a bit.
Okay.
And what is each district doing to handle this? Now, we've been very fortunate that we do have a mental health clinician at our school sites, but not everybody has a full-time one anymore. So looking at that and then meeting with the Sequoia Healthcare District today to make sure that we get additional supports in mental health. Although when you get those additional supports in mental health, it's through a contracted arena where it's a separate entity like One Life. And it's, even though it is support, it's an intern that's coming in to do some of this work, but it's not like having your own counselor at the school site that knows the child, knows the parents, and so forth, and can maintain that relationship. And then from what I've heard also at times, the One Life intern may not be the same person that you'll get over, several days or something. So we're working with less, but we're getting a bit more when it comes to having an outside agency help us, where this outside agency is, one of the examples was One Life, and we are getting those dollars to pay for that agency from the Sequoia Healthcare District.
Okay, got it. No, that's helpful, man.
Yeah, but it definitely is up from last year.
Yeah.
And, and a couple of years ago, we were still having a lot of anxiety of coming to school and a lot of that. So it's definitely switched back to, I was going to ask, I don't know if we had tracked it, but before the pandemic, what was it like back then? Because I think it may have been a little higher. Maybe, I don't know if we're back to what that was. I'd be interested to see for myself what happened in 2019, if it was similar to that, to what we have now. I don't know if we have data on it. But
going down the list, then goal 2. I think I tracked 4 different metrics that we were measuring. LPAC growth, rate classification, LTL rate, and then a similar sort of family engagement piece. It sounds like LPAC, we maybe early, but we feel like we are on track generally. We're
we've
hopeful,
done
at
a
least.
lot of work. Catherine is out. Catherine is really out at sites, monitoring, looking at what's happening and what we've rolled out with our supplemental curriculum and see what supports we need to continue to use. So there's been a lot of, one of the things we do know that prior to 2 years ago, everyone's teaching ELD now. So we're very hopeful that some of that practice and consistency in all the sites is going to be helpful. So we're very hopeful.
Cool. All right. If you guys are hopeful, I'm
And
hopeful.
not only that, but we've actually had principals really focus in on the LTELs, like know who your LTELs, talk to your teachers, because the LTELs, we have LTELs who are at 3s that just need that bump. So for example, MIT did a whole boot camp before we started LCAP for 3 weeks. So kids on any of those students that were in ELD, they were coming after school for an hour for 2 days a week and for 3 weeks. So she was looking at trying to do a boot camp and trying to get kids going so that they can get support. So I think there's different things that have happened, but we're very hopeful.
Okay, I guess that jumping to the LTL piece, because looking at the data, it looked like maybe the answer is we are not on track to meet our goals.
Not on LTALs, not on LTALs.
Okay, so
Yeah.
broadly, no need to deep dive on this, but this is a group clearly that we are highly focused on. And
Yes.
I think from the grapevine, that is, we are not alone. Okay, and then the reclassification rate sounds like we are maybe, we're close.
Close. I don't know that we're gonna hit it, but we're close.
Okay.
It all
Keep an
depends
eye.
on this year, because so one of the things that the criteria changed from 2 years ago. So with that criteria change, especially for our special education, that is a huge impact for us. Because our special education students who are duly identified have to hit a 4 in order to reclassify. We used to be able to do it with a 3. But we can no longer do that. So it gave us some leeway. And then I don't know that we have do we have a lot of domain specific assessments for our special ed? Yeah, not much, right? Because yeah. So there's a whole for special education for students. You can qualify for only domain specific, but you have to qualify under your specific learning disability. So we don't have very many that qualify for that. So we're still under that umbrella. So yeah, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one it's a hard number, but many of them are 8th graders. And so they move on to high school as well. But
Okay.
then we are tracking, and when you see the SIPSs this year, you'll see we have long-term 4th and 5th graders because we know they're at risk. So we're now tracking those at-risk kids. We're considering on the SIPSs, 4th or 5th grade that are at risk because we need to start earlier. We can't start till middle school. We need to start in 4th and 5th grade to monitor. So Jenny is now pulling that data, who is at risk in that area, so that principals, everyone has that hindsight that we need to work with these groups early.
Okay, this is for the upcoming SIPSs, the ones that are coming.
Upcoming
Okay.
SIPSs, yes, upcoming SIPSs.
When you say that we are are we classifying them like in the same bucket as LTELs, or are we caveating it like they're at risk?
in the
Because I don't
SIP
want us to overstate it.
Yeah, and the SIPSA, you'll see 4th, 5th grade, and then you'll see, especially like Hoover has 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, you'll see that they have a 4th and 5th grade category. All the schools will have a 4 or 5, because those are kids who are maybe a 1 or a 2 or a 3. We really need to be cognizant of who they are. And some, there may be only 20 kids, there may be 10 kids, but those 10 kids are part of our numbers, right? So we really want the teachers to know who they are, especially if they're a 3, how do we get them to a 4? And so that's been some of the work we've been doing this year. Look at your students who are 3s. How do we up them? What are we really doing for that? So it's work that we've been doing, but because it's a new focus for us. We started focusing on it last year because we knew it was coming, but now we have more of the data.
Okay, that's going into group 3, goal 3. There's a bunch of them. I guess maybe just to fast track it.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of it we're waiting on data. We
Yeah.
feel hopeful again, but we'll see.
Yeah.
And then some of the SARC stuff we are on track with, except for credential teachers. We
Correct.
have some work to do on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of snapshot of where we are on. Okay,
Mm.
that's all I
Thank
want to
you.
check on. Thanks.
All right, Trustee Weekly.
Good.
Yeah, that was a good amount of questions. I think that was, yeah, I mean, the only real question I had was like, are we on track? Yeah, like a stoplight kind of thing would have been perfect on each one of those slides to say, yeah, this one, given what we know right now, we're on track or we're off track or we're not going to make it. Would have been really important.
I'll remember that for the end of the year report and put a green red where we
Yeah,
made it, where we met or did not.
Well,
meet, put some
I
symbol.
do want to say that, I mean, it was really helpful having the slide there with the tables that said, here's the baseline, here's where we are, and here's the goal that we want to have at the end of the 3rd year. It's just, that I don't recall seeing a presentation even with just that format there. So just don't make me have to imagine where we are on the line for that progress. Tell me, are we above it, below it, or on it? And then, that would be the perfect part of it. I'm also glad that you were able to present the 75 slides so quickly. There was a lot of information in there. There's a lot of support that goes into the LCAP. I know with like 460 plus students that are underhoused and over half the student population that's, in families that are experiencing social economic disadvantage, we have numerous numbers of newcomers and other immigrants that perhaps even went through trauma even to get here to school. There's just a lot that the school is doing to support the community before you can even say that they're really at tier 1 in the classroom. It's really nice to see all of that funded in the LCAP and be able to support that. And then be able to see how that's showing up in the metrics and be able to put that together. So thanks for the presentation. I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I'm really thankful that for Anna and her team, and not all the team is here. Some of them are online with us, but thank you for all you do.
Thank you. And thank you for recognizing that. I think, Mike, especially because we do deal with a lot of kids that have trauma and I think it's super important that sometimes we have to deal with the trauma before we can deal with the educational part. It's really true. Thank you for recognizing that. Thank you, team.
All right, let's move on to section 11. And we'll start with 11.1, which is the first reading and discussion of board policy 3515.5, sex offender notification. Wendy, do you have an intro for it? Yeah, okay, great.
Yes, thank you. As you may have noticed on this particular item, the board policy is new, but the ARs were updated, which is a little unusual to see. And I know the board takes action on the board policy, but I did want to point that out. And certainly there has been some changes with communication protocols and identifying liaisons of the district and so forth. So this is our first batch with our new board policy committee that is being brought with Jennifer and David Lee joining the team. And so really we were able to meet and talk through, and we took a first glance through, and I appreciate everyone reading in advance. Are there any questions regarding this particular board policy?
Anyone have questions? Anything of interest from the committee to report back from this policy? It doesn't sound like it. Yeah, I didn't have any questions for it either. Discussion is over. Let's move on to 11.2, which is now the first reading and potential discussion of board policy 6170.1, transitional kindergarten.
Yes, and we already have board policy, so you'll notice this as an update, but it really addressed the different age groups that are now changing with the TK. Of course, reiterating the credentialing and so forth that's needed, and the various assessment tools in this particular board policy. So this is an update as we brought this back a few years back when we really were diving into TK. Any questions?
Questions about the TK policy? I know I didn't have any. Nope, they look like straightforward policies. So thank you, Wendy, and the policy committee for prepping those and getting these on the agenda tonight. With that, we can move to the consent agenda, which we approve in one motion. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
I second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
That was all in favor. Great. So now we're on to the action items. And the first one is 13.1, the submission of the 2025 CSBA Delegate Assembly nominations.
Are there any questions in regarding this item? It's something that takes place every year.
There are 3 seats and 3 candidates. Conveniently, Gregory Land was a former Redwood City principal. So, okay, great. Can I get a motion to approve the nominations?
I move we approve these nominations.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great. So now we're on to 13.2, adoption of resolution number 16, and that is the release and reassignment of certificated administrators.
Yes, in regards to administrators, certificated administrators specifically, you'll notice a handful of positions that are either released or reassigned, and that is the pathway to make adjustments for site administrators under Ed Code. And so I wanted to check to see if there were any questions regarding this. I know the board did a very thorough analysis on these subsequent resolutions, and I appreciate that. But are there any questions for me?
Any questions? Okay, so this is an action item. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution?
I will make a motion to approve resolution number 16.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so now we're on to 13.3, which is resolution 17, and this is reduction or elimination of certificated services for the fiscal year 2024-25.
Thank you. I know the board did take action on a PKS or a layoff resolution back in December. This particular evening and the subsequent resolutions that are coming are about the typical changes to positions that need to occur under Ed Code. And so many of these positions are actually grant or site-based funded, for example, PTOs and other types of site funding, which have not yet been secure yet. And so at this point in time, prior to March 15th, it is our duty and responsibility to bring to the board this elimination when there is unstable funding or lack of funding in this case. Now, please know that we could essentially get a letter of intent to fund in a month or two or what have you, and then that might change and we can bring back those positions. But at this moment in time, which is difficult because with some of those grant funds, those intent letters of intent are just not in yet. And unfortunately, it's a timing problem. So for some of these positions, that is very much the case. And the other parts is that the other portions of this is it really decisions were made either on declining enrollment and making adjustments as such, or what is relatively new to our district over the last few years is this student needs assessment, certainly for the elective positions. So I wanted to point that out, that is really driving what elective positions, for example, are being offered at sites with that student interest survey. And so we need to make adjustments accordingly in order to meet the needs of our students. So for this particular certificated PKS resolution, those are the rationale behind those items. Are there any questions?
Does anyone have questions? I do want to say just for this one and the ensuing ones, just that, I think probably just the whole board, you just really appreciate the work that everyone's doing. It's really valuable work and I really value what they're doing. At the same time, we have these timelines, these uncertain funding that we have to follow through, and we do have this responsibility to, manage a budget, which is really tight. And so as enrollment changes and if programming needs change, there are these adjustments, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't change how much we value and appreciate the work that's been done there. So I just want to make sure that at least that position is clear. So with that, can I get a motion to approve? This is resolution 17.
I will make a motion to approve resolution 17.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, so now we are on to 13.4, which is resolution 18, and this is for classified services reduction for 2024-25.
So similar to the previous resolution in regards to our classified staff at this moment in time, with the information we know about enrollment and needs from our students around the district in anticipation for next school year, we are bringing forth this resolution for these particular kinds of service that we have at this moment in time, once again, because of enrollment and the timing of it before March 15th. And so should enrollment change, we'll have to take another look at that, but this is what we know at the time.
Okay. And we do have a speaker's card for this one, so I'd like to invite Maria Stockton to please come and speak. As a reminder, you'll need to turn the microphone on, which is the person on the right, and then you'll have, like all our public comment, you'll have 3 minutes.
Of course. Hi there, Maria Stockton, office assistant at Clifford School and CSEA Redwood City 5 chapter president. Before I read off what I wrote for this thing here, I just want to make one little comment when training was here. Last board meeting, there was a person who gave a report and she talked about how she wished her instructional assistant knew enough math to assist the students she has there now as well as her. That is not the problem of the instructional assistant. When they are hired in the district, they give a test that includes math, and they're hired. Over the years, the district does changes to curriculum all the time. Unfortunately, they only train teachers. They do not train the teacher's partner along with them so they can support the child in what they're learning and the teacher. So I don't know why the classified staff that are in the class are being, left behind. So that might be something you please think about when you're talking about training. Okay, so my report. It used to be that cuts for the budget were to be cuts that was called furthest away from the child and the students. Now cutbacks have been heavily made to those positions that are closest to the child. This district has never been classified support heavy, teacher heavy, or certified heavy. Our approval of cuts, let's see, your approval of cuts don't affect just one person. A paraeducator one-on-one may work with one child, but they also support the teacher. They support the special ed department as well as the child's families. If that para is out, another para must move in and take over their child as well as this other one and do all the responsibilities. Librarians work with classes, some classes 25 to 30 students in each class. They work in groups, but also they work with each student individually, taking time to find the child's what they like, what they are studying in class, what report resources and information is needed to further their homework and projects. Librarians also support the teachers, district, and families. Office staff support the students and district at our sites not only through our computers and phones, doing daily, weekly, and monthly attendance data where the district needs to receive their funding, but we also personally give each and every child that comes into our office, whether it's for illness, injury, issues at home, and we attend to them individually as well as all together. We support them, we support our administrator, we support every teacher, and we support all those families. My school has over 700 kids. Please understand, we have 2.5, almost half, people in our office, and we will go down to 2. I would say that every classified support member touches the lives of children at our sites every day, just as teachers do, just as certified. I just have a couple more sentences.
Thank you, Maria. No, I'm sorry, but I can't allow
Okay,
an extension.
thank you.
Yeah, just because of fairness. But I really appreciate your comments and the support that you and all the classified members provide the entire school community. So this is any comments or questions from board members? So this is 13.4, resolution number 18. Do we have a motion to approve?
I will make a motion to approve resolution 18.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're on to 13.5, which is resolution 19. And this is a resolution to approve the standards for local certification of universal transitional kindergarten teachers.
Yes, we do have a prior resolution in place over a year, actually about a year ago, in which the board took action to allow for a waiver so that preschool teachers could teach TK. Very experienced with that age group, of course. And that was a successful move. Many districts did that around the peninsula and around the state. What we did not include in that resolution was actually the ability for seasoned kindergarten teachers to actually work with TK. And I think at the time we're much more focused on the new start of these changes with TK. So in hindsight, we probably should have included it back then, as others did. So tonight I'm bringing to you this new resolution that will allow for the district to move seasoned kindergarten teachers into a TK classroom, assuming they have 12 ECE units, early childhood education, which is determined to be the courses needed to serve that particular population, along with continuing the preschool teacher opportunity. Because the alternative is then a person that has a multiple subject credential and have only worked with 3 and 4 year olds and have 24 units. And so we're looking at another avenue of option if and when we need to use it. So that's for the purpose of the resolution.
Sounds like a sensible resolution to me to be able to satisfy the filling those positions. Does anyone have questions or comments? Cecilia.
Quick question. So obviously when needed, but say you have a TK open and there's a kinder teacher. Would that be and I just went blank. Involuntary transfer? Or is that a voluntary transfer? If they're gonna teach TK, is that next year? Like, how do you work that out?
So a current teacher who wants to voluntarily to teach TK would we have a form that they fill out to want to transfer internally. And what will happen is we look at the requirements and the qualifications of the teacher and say, are you eligible? Similar to whether we look at multiple subject or single subject teachers as well when we're considering placement. So whether it's actually an internal teacher or an outside candidate, they have to meet the minimum qualifications. And part of that is years of experience. And we really want seasoned teachers who are well versed in their craft to be in front of students. And so we take all of those factors into consideration. For an internal candidate, there is a meeting, like an interview with the principal. They can learn about expectations and needs and collaborative information and all the data pieces and all those things that are important for a school site. And then that also comes across as an outside candidate at the interview. And then the best person for the job is considered, especially for our bilingual positions, because those are considered hard to fill in our teacher contract.
Great. So I guess, so if some kinder teachers would be interested, you would look at their transcripts, I guess. Right?
Yes.
Make sure that they're set. And is that something, is that a position that you would have available, say next year, those kinder teachers would then voluntarily
move into
apply
that
to
right.
the TK? You would
Correct.
still interview and the best candidate would get the position.
Right. So I can think of one situation where we have a kindergarten teacher who is interested and pending this board approval at this moment is not eligible. But once the board assumingly takes action, then we've already reviewed that person's transcripts and the teacher has been a site teacher for many years. And the principal does feel that this person would be the best person for the job. And so we'll consult the teacher and go through Article 11 of the RCTA contract through the method needed to ensure that it's the best match for both of them.
Okay, so with that and no more questions, can I get a motion to approve resolution number 19?
I move we approve resolution 19.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Awesome. Okay, so now we're on to resolution 20, which is the approval of education code and Title V options for teaching assignments in the current school year, 24-25 school year.
Yes, typically we do bring this to the board in June and in August in preparation for the next school year. However, we did have a change of staff in the speech language teacher area, and this person is joining our team. And so we do need to bring this waiver. It's a credential waiver specifically because it's a new person that has been added to our employee pool, or potentially will be after this evening.
Great. Sounded qualified from reading the memo. Did anybody have questions or comments?
The text of the resolution itself doesn't incorporate the name of the individuals, as far as I can see. Is that intentional or?
So this,
I mean, I see it in the public content note in the agenda, but
Yeah.
taking a look at the resolution PDF, I don't see names there.
no, it wouldn't be required in the name for this particular resolution, similar to the format that we use at the beginning of the year. So I don't think that's common to have the person's name in the resolution, but certainly in the board memo.
Cool.
Yeah, no, great question.
Sounds good. Can I get a motion to approve resolution 20?
Make a motion to approve resolution 20.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Our next action item in our long list here is this is 13.7. So we're on to approval of release of temporary teachers.
So I recognize that the appearance of this PDF is quite long and lengthy, but a temporary teacher is one that's defined as having an end date on their contract, and all of our international staff and our guest teachers are included in that group. Our international staff, we intend to have most people come back next year. So this list will be reduced dramatically under the provisions of Ed Code that allow us to give temporary contracts for individuals that are on a visa. So this is more of a timing concern than anything else and will be likely rectified as we move forward into March and April. And then we have a handful that are truly grant funded or PTO funded who will not be returning next year. And so that's why the list looks quite lengthy.
Thanks for the explanation, the additional information. Does anyone have questions or comments about this resolution? This is just an approval. All right, can I get a motion to approve the release of the temporary teachers?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve item 13.7.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, and finally, we're at 13.8, approval of declaration of need.
So the declaration of need is an annual notice that is brought to the board, which allows the district to, in the case of a needed situation, so this is what we strive to be the exception, are able to use the California Teaching Commission's approved pathway for waivers. So a very typical situation might be a seasoned teacher in our district who might want an ed code waiver to teach an elective that they have experience in, they have units for in their university background, but they don't officially have a credential. So rather than have a misassignment, which is something that Anna monitors as well through the LCAP, we go through this process in order to, go through the waiver allowable system through the CTC in order to have those situations occur. Or a multiple subject teacher who may be working in a single subject environment, like an English language arts, social studies teacher that then is going to move into just teaching English. So they happen here and there, probably about 10% of the time, but without the declaration of need, we're unable to do so. So thank you for considering.
Thanks, Wendy. And are these are usually ones where we see the reassignment before they actually get reassigned anyways, or?
Yes, I would bring an ed code waiver to you, usually in June and August,
Yep.
or the limited assignment option.
Yep.
With a list of names and subjects.
Any questions, comments? All right, then I need a motion to approve the declaration of need.
I'll make a motion to approve the declaration of need.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. Okay, so now we're on to, thank you, Wendy, for all those items that we were able to get through this evening. So now we're on to board and superintendent reports. Who has something to report and would like to start?
Went to a few things, I think, since our last meeting. We had the Health and Wellness Committee, along with Trustee King. A lot of similar data through discussion today. Very helpful to hear. I think this is also where we heard about the spike in the suicide ideation stuff. So it's something, something that we are mindful of. Also went to the CSBA MIG training, which is very helpful for me. Maybe for, you guys have done it, I imagine. But a lot of same things from today, which were on accountability. So helpful to really hear, dig in, and also meet other trustees in other districts to get a sense there. Then did a couple of site visits, one at North Star, and then one at Clifford, both very helpful. Different populations, different things, but lots of, it's just helpful to walk around, I'm very much still learning the campus, learning all the teachers, the staff, et cetera, but great to see. I think a few things that popped up to me were just this continuation among staff to build a culture of keeping on pushing to do the next thing, right? So it's not being complacent, but thinking about, okay, we've hit this mark, like how do we make this even more enriching? And so that was really, it was great to see and witness in person. One other thing, Clifford, that I was a little bit surprised I didn't know was just the kind of the concentration or the number of students with special ed needs, which I could see it in real time, the demand that puts on the staff and the resources that takes away from classroom. I mean, it's obviously needed, but it also means that there's more IEP meetings that which brings teachers out of classrooms. And so it's just something that I was aware of as I walked around. And then one thing that was noted was just I got to meet one of the guest teachers who seemed to have a very good relationship with the staff and the students, and I think brought some consistency. So that was appreciated. Yeah.
Well, powerful. And do you have the slides from the wellness committee? Are they shareable with us, with the rest of the board?
Yeah, I'll share those.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Sometimes I think the previous members would send them around. I always found them pretty good. Okay. Cecilia.
Yeah, I have two things to report. I attended along with Dr. Baker and Michelle Redmond, Jorge Quintana, which by the way, shout out to both of them because they do so much behind the scenes, right? The Spanish Superintendent Advisory Committee at Hoover, and an evening of, I don't know what that was called. There was like a webinar for.
It was the information we gave to people who wanted to know about immigration and support.
The
and so forth.
resources, and that we're here to support them.
And there were, 150 people on the webinar.
Yeah. That was it.
I put together a guide for trustees on, in general, not focused on this set of trustees, on how to most productively conduct site visits. And I ran that by a number of people, collected feedback, iterated on that. And it's my intent to publish that guide and potentially get it put out by CSEA.
I attended my first RCTA climate committee meeting with Wendy and John, and Aaron, Brenna, and Suzanne. So that was good. And then last night, Rick had already mentioned this, was the Citizen Bond Oversight Committee. They got information about the audit that we had seen at our last board meeting. They got information about Measure S and Measure T projects, expenditures, the usual oversight that they get for that stuff.
Mine have already been mentioned.
All right, well then we can move on to information. We have 3 information items here. And Rick, I don't know if there's anything you want to say about them. We've received the information. Does anybody have questions about it? All right, perfect. Then I think we can move on to correspondence. Does anyone have correspondence that they want to share? Okay, then we can move on to other business and suggested items for future agenda. I think we have the study session that's going to be on for the facilities master plan. And then I want to sort of, one of the things that we do as a board is we do superintendent evaluation. We have not as a board rigorously done that regularly. I'd like to get that onto our regular governance calendar. So I'm hoping that we can do it over 2 closed sessions, one mid-April, so April 16th, and one mid-May, so that would be our May 14th meeting. Probably an hour for the one in April and probably 30 minutes for the one in May. I'd also like us to try and do a board self-evaluation that CSBA offers. I think that we would do that. I need your advice on whether that would be a closed session or an open session, so we can figure that out later.
Yeah.
I think it's closed. Yeah, I think it's closed session as well. And I was thinking, but I'll take your advice on this, that we would do it on the last meeting in June. That one is usually on the shorter side because we're approving all the things that we discussed ad nauseum the week before. So I thought that we might have the energy to be able to do it there, and we're sparing everybody else the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so for June 25th, if we could get a closed session for governance, team performance, and a self-evaluation. And I'll make sure to get all the materials out to everybody for those evaluations to be able to put that stuff in. And I'm hoping that by putting it onto the calendar now, it'll make it into next year's calendar, and our next president won't have to remember to get these things onto the calendar. They'll be in your face and you'll have to follow it. Yeah, so, okay, great. Those are the only items that I had for suggested items for future. Board meetings calendar. I don't know, Evelyn, if there are other changes that you have in there.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Can I actually add something to the other items.
Sure.
For future meeting. So first also, make training and all these things is great. This is like, I was like, yeah, we should do this. Anyway, the other thing was, the SARCs. I know that we had that as an item, but then we pulled them. Is that something that we need to put back on?
Yeah, we're gonna bring them back.
Okay,
They
cool.
were- Yeah, they were pulled. They were pulled. Yeah. Back.
Okay, cool.
Good memory. Okay, and nothing on the calendar, so then we're on to adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.